Are we on? Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. It's nice to be with you again. This is Richard Sachs, and this is Lost Arts Radio Live for Saturday, the 4th day of August 18th, the 4th day of 2018 in August. And this is a day that Mike Adams had been afraid that might be the beginning of kind of a lead into a civil war. So there's a lot of important stuff happening around us right now in the outside world. And on this show, it's just short. It's just an hour or so every week. And so we don't go over everything that's happening, but we like to choose a few things and look at what the significance is and things that would be good for us to know about and may not be portrayed accurately in the mainstream corporate media. So it's funny, before the broadcast, I was just thinking to myself, in the higher educational experience I had recently, I guess that's what they call it, in a PhD health sciences program, they were saying, well, if you want to be a real scientist, and I'm sure this applies to a real journalist as well, because that's kind of the role we're playing when we bring out this show, you have to do two things, no opinion and no emotion, and then you can really be a good scientist. And actually what they're doing is setting up their graduate scientists to become tools of the power structure, and they don't even notice when they're being used to destroy the world. And it's working pretty well. They've got these brilliant people not even realizing the impact or the context of what they're doing. So unfortunately, the programming is really not working very well on me. I still have opinion and emotion about things, and when I'm looking at what's going on in the world right now, it definitely comes out. And I know a lot of people, especially women, are accused of this all the time. They're saying, you're emotional, so you're not objective and you're not seeing clearly in everything. Well, I think I have the same problem, because when I look at what's going on, I feel affected by it, because I have a motive. I want us all to be okay. And there's such massive suffering going on in the world now. It bothers me what's happening, but it's important to know what it is and understand its significance, and then know what the solutions are, because there are solutions. And they're not the ones that you usually hear about, if you hear about any. Certainly not going and destroying all the bad guys, which every side is supposed to feel, so that you have this huge clash and we have to bring in, world tyranny to bring law and order back. It's not the way we want to go. It's not going to have the result that we want. So the first thing I was looking at in reviewing this week is what happened today, the day that Mike was thinking might begin to get out of hand, because the power structure really has some things they're trying to ramp up to cause chaos, not only in America but worldwide. But America's especially significant because there's at least some memory of freedom in America, at least in some of the population, and that has to be wiped out, according to the power structure, what they want to do. And it's rising in parts of America and also in other countries, which is really irritating to the people, the global rulers, because it's not the direction they want to push us in. An example of this week is what happened today. Pretty sure it's mostly over now, except for maybe isolated incidents. But in Portland, one of the main events that was making Mike Adams think the way that he was of what was about to happen was there was a big march and a prayer vigil, kind of for unity and for supporting America, which is the country that they're in Portland. So it's kind of normal, everybody in every country is supposed to support their country becoming the best that it can be, which is a place for freedom and the people who live there to live the way they want, as long as they don't intentionally hurt anybody else. That's the whole idea. And it didn't originate with America at all. It's been a perpetual idea that's always been a potential for how people could live on this planet. And it's just that America was really significant because the founders of it, even though they weren't totally living up to it, obviously, they had the idea that that was supposed to be the goal. and the reason for a government at all was to protect the individual rights of the people. And it was not supposed to be a democracy. That was what they considered one of the worst forms of government ever, because, and this is really important to understand, when a lot of the people who are moving us toward chaos and conflict and ultimately tyranny are constantly saying our democracy. We have to protect our democracy. Either they have no idea about what forms of government are, or they do, more likely they do have an idea, and they're trying to bring in something under the guise of our democracy. America was never intended to be a democracy. It's not mentioned once in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, but republic is. And the idea is that in a democracy, 51% of the people can vote to do anything they want to the other 49%. And that's democratic. It's horrible. You have no guaranteed rights, but in a constitutional republic, if the Constitution is written with some wisdom and the idea that freedom is the goal and cooperation, hopefully mutual respect, then that Constitution can't be violated. Of course, in America today, it's violated every day. But the idea is that that's supposed to save you from a majority of the people going crazy or being manipulated in a crazy direction. And the people who were going to march and celebrate freedom and support their country in Portland today were coming from that point of view, as far as I could tell. And I heard many of the speakers, and it was mostly really great. And then there were people on the other side who wanted to destroy the prayer vigil and the march and everything. And they were primarily called Antifa. You may have heard of them. They're a communist terrorist group that's active in the U.S. right now with the support of many of the city governments, state governments, and some corrupt elements of the federal government even. But there's an effort to try to get rid of those elements, but it's far from accomplished right now. So Antifa has massive numbers, and they are tied to funding by some very nefarious groups that you've probably heard of. And their mission is to destroy the idea that you can support a country for freedom and bring back what America was supposed to stand for. They are totally against that. And in order to combat fascism, by which they say everybody who wants to have their free country in the republic is a Nazi, basically, they believe in tactics for peace, such as beating up women and children and old people, hitting them with bike locks on chains, swinging them like a mace, and that's how they fight against fascism. They're pretty out of it, but they're well funded. I forget one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's great movies. He was talking to a terrorist at that time in the movie, and that was before we found out what Arnold was really like. But he was great as a hero in these movies, and he was talking to this lady running a terrorist organization, and she said, and he was saying, what are you guys doing? You're raving lunatics. And she said, yes, but very well funded raving lunatics. And that kind of, describes Antifa and their friends really well. They wear black masks over their face, cover their heads so they can't be accused of the crimes, theoretically, that they're committing. They wear, a lot of times, red kerchiefs with hammer and sickle on them, thinking that in communism, according to Marx and Engels, which I'm just rereading right now, you're supposed to get this wonderful utopia if you kill all the bad people. And in the 60s, there was a group called the Weather Underground, which is still active under other names today, and very closely associated with groups like Antifa. And they were figuring that in America, in order to bring in utopia, first thing they'd have to do is murder about 25 million people just for everybody's benefit, you understand. And that's the kind of thing that communism does. It's the most vicious, tyrannical system in the world in modern history, anyway. There's lots of examples of it. It destroys the country, but the idea of the people who bring it in is that at the top, you get a ruling class that gets to live like they want to, and they have tremendous wealth and luxury, and they control all the slaves, and they tell everybody else, you're going to have a utopia. We're just here to make sure that you get the utopia, so we have to, hold all the money for you. But it's in your name. It belongs to the people. It's complete nonsense. So that's what this well-funded group moved in, but to do. And in the past, they've, beat up everybody up. They beat up police. They hate the police. They hate men and women and children. And I mean, they're not very nice. But of course, they're fighting fascism, right? So they were going to show up again, and they were advertising it, and elements in the city government were actually encouraging them, saying that, oh, all these Nazis are coming to town today. And it was these guys wanting to hold a prayer vigil. They're not Nazis. I mean, incredible insanity happening. So fortunately, thousands and thousands and thousands of people for the prayer vigil showed up, more than the terrorists, and they couldn't really do anything, at least as long as I was watching it. And I was watching it up to like half an hour before we started this broadcast. So it looks like it didn't work. And it was actually peaceful, which is great. The beginning of the Civil War and stuff that Mike was legitimately worried about didn't really happen at that event. And I'm happy to give you some positive news in spite of the general atmosphere of insanity up to about 4 o'clock Pacific time. As far as I know, no chaos and violence was really happening other than maybe a few isolated incidents. Usually the Antifa people like to beat up a few stragglers going home when there is no one to defend them, if they can find, mothers and women or old men or things, or men who look like they're not going to fight back, and they enjoy attacking them on their way home. But at least they didn't get to do anything during the main event. And the police, who had been rightfully accused of letting this all happen in previous events, actually did a really good job today. It went really well. And it was interesting because InfoWars, that I'm always supporting, and I say, if you want a comprehensive news source, the best one I know among so many that are independent news sources now is Alex Jones. And he sent several reporters there. I think 3 of his own, and then he made deals with some others. And they were in several places with live streaming the whole time. Not on YouTube, because he's kicked off YouTube for being too accurate and honest, but on some other platforms as well as his own live stream. And they were having conversations with the people in the prayer vigil. They were actually coherent and really nice people. And they were saying why they were there, what they believed in, why they had gone sometimes thousands of miles to be there for a few hours. And really inspiring. There's still some sane Americans that are not responding to the campaign to make us all crazy right now. That was great. And then they'd go try to talk to the other people. A few of them could say a few words, but most of them could only swear, and they couldn't really start throwing things because there were too many people. They were kind of overwhelmed. But they would make weird noises and start screaming, and in the end they were chanting, and the basis of the chant was Donald Trump, the current president, is Ku Klux Klan, which is totally ridiculous, of course, but he's Ku Klux Klan, he's fascist, he's a racist, he's a Nazi, and of course we all know he hates women and everybody of every race, and he's only doing it for his own arrogance, and he's lazy and stupid, and all the things that their group believes, because the whole corporate media in America is telling them that those things are true. I mean, and if they're not sophisticated in understanding the media, they think NPR and the other major media represent different parts of the spectrum, and they just all agree that Trump is an idiot, racist, Nazi, Russian agent, homophobe, Islamophobe, misogynist. But that's not really what's going on. They're all mouthpieces for the same corporate conglomerate, which tells them what to say, and if they don't, they get fired. So they have a free choice of anything to say. It's just that if they don't say what's on the teleprompter, they don't have a job. But it's their choice, of course. So they all choose to say what's on the teleprompter. And even Fox News, which was a little bit outside the part of the spectrum that the others were on, is now almost completely corrupted. And they're doing the same thing of attacking Trump, attacking Russia. The reason they attack Russia which is going on all the time now and really intense since the summit at Helsinki recently, when Trump finally did what he should have done right after the election, and he met with Putin. Now they're just really going crazy. It's a lot of the commentators on mainstream news will say, yeah, it's very concerning to see Trump meet with Putin. There's very strange behavior there. You know, he should be threatening Russia and building up the military for attacking Russia. Excuse me. And he's actually talking to Putin. That's really suspicious. And they're serious when they say this stuff. It's a really odd situation, but if you understand it, it's clear where it's coming from. So Trump caved in to the pressure from the Democrats and the media and other corrupt elements within the government. His traitor advisors, most of which have been absolutely terrible, and his bad lawyers and everybody, and said, oh yeah, well, maybe Russia really is bad. And corrupt generals said, yeah, they're really bad. And while they were saying that, and Trump was, Trump is conditioned too. I don't think he's been able to believe, more now, but not before, that top level people in the military, top successful business people that control huge corporations, that they could be that bad, totally corrupted, and actually enemies of the country that he's trying to be president of. But now he's starting to get that. It's very hard when you've spent your 72 years, as that's his age right now, being programmed subtly and subliminally and through all the media propaganda that these heads of industry are just really valiant people, and they're brilliant and successful and all this stuff. And the military generals are trying to, follow in the footsteps of Superman, who believed in truth, justice, in the American way, right? And saving the world from everything that was bad, and having time to save all the individuals who were about to fall off a cliff or got stuck in an elevator or anything. Anyway, and Matt Dillon, he was always shooting the fastest of anybody because he was good. And he was, all these things are programming. I got the same thing watching the Cartwrights on Bonanza every week when I was a kid. And they'd always win because they were good. So they would always shoot faster than the bad guys. And this is all programming a vision of reality into us. And Trump is subject to it too, but he's got courage and he's willing to question more than you're supposed to question. That's why they want to get rid of him, because he's only in office. And I'm sorry that, a lot of people will hate me for saying this, but he's not in office for an ego trip. He's not in office for arrogance. Like John Kennedy, he's there because he really wants to help the country, not because he's perfect. Kennedy, was cheating on his wife and he had all these other problems. But his motive, what made Kennedy great, in my opinion, he had some socialist leanings and misunderstanding of how economics works and everything, but his motive was good. That's like earth-shakingly important. And so he ended up realizing what the Federal Reserve System was doing as part of a complex of central banks, all under the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, above the law, controlling Congress, controlling most presidents and most companies, because they print the money out of nothing, and they have a deal with government, thanks to Woodrow Wilson in 1913, that they can just control everything with money that doesn't exist. And then have the subservient banks under them doing what's called fractional reserve banking, which is total criminal activity. It's lending money you don't have and getting interest for it. That system is going on all over the world, and certainly all over America. So Kennedy found that out. And the reason he found it out is because he was there to try to serve the country. That's weird. Most presidents are not thinking like that at all. Doesn't matter what party they're in. Parties are stupid anyway. They're just a distraction from what the individual believes and thinks and is going to do, which is what you need to watch. So that's why Kennedy had to be eliminated, because he was going to, undermine a lot of the nefarious criminal activity of the CIA and what was going on in Vietnam. He stopped a suggestion for a false flag against Cuba to invade them. And he just was very much not appreciated by the real power structure, which is far above the elected officials. See, Trump's on the other party. It doesn't make any difference. He's the same kind of threat, and even more so, to the power structure, because he's got courage and he's willing to do what he believes. It's not at all because he's right about everything. That's a secondary issue. If the motive is good and the person finds out what's right, they'll do it. But if the motive's not good, forget it. I mean, you can explain everything to them. Their motive is not honest and not for the people. It's for themselves and for the people they serve. Trump's not like that. And the foolish people who believe the mainstream media narrative about Trump are being diverted from realizing what he is. He's wrong about lots and lots of things, especially environmental issues. He was right to cut down regulations and stop the EPA from all the stupid things that they're doing, which are hurting people, arresting people and fining them for collecting rainwater on their property. That's the kind of thing that EPA was into. It was really corrupt. But where Trump is weak is on the real environmental issues. I don't think he fully realizes that. He's mentioned that there are other sources of energy that are being hidden from us. That was earth-shaking to have that mentioned. You're not supposed to talk about that. But the thing is, there really are. Dr. Stephen Greer who's a total anti-Trump person as far as I can tell, and fell for the liberal nonsense, but he's really done some wonderful work as far as exposing what's being hidden. I recommend looking at his videos on YouTube, Dr. Stephen Greer, and also the archive of the show we did on Stephen Greer too. You can see that at lostartsradio.com or our YouTube channel, as long as we have one. The website will probably stay up, and we're getting a presence on Real Video now in case the amping up censorship gets rid of us on other mainstream channels. But the thing is that Trump was willing to talk about questioning vaccines. Anybody that's not sure about whether he's secretly working for the power structure, I mean, if you don't see that, then you don't understand what's going on at all, because you're not allowed to question vaccines. It's one of the main assaults against humanity. And if you question it, they might not be able to do it to you. So that would be very irritating, and you can't do that. Many people have died, literally, from trying to do that. Trump tried to do that. He hasn't been able to push it through yet to start the commission that he wanted with Bobby Kennedy, who, by the way, is a Democrat. Okay, this party thing means nothing. He was going to question vaccines and start a commission to really look into vaccine safety. Well, there's no such thing as vaccine safety. And it's not about the mercury that Robert Kennedy thought it was originally. It's not even about just the mercury and aluminum. It's about the whole concept of vaccination. Alex Jones is mistaken on this, I think, respectfully, because I deeply appreciate Alex Jones and his work, but he's not correct on this. Because in the beginning, if you look at the whole history of vaccination, and you go back to Edward Jenner, 1899 or something in the UK, when it was about smallpox, they were maiming and killing people, mostly children, back then, and there was no adjuvant. They'd never used mercury or aluminum, or they just used the basic disease organism that they were injecting into people that they thought would make them really healthy and fix their immunity. Really stupid idea. But I understand how originally it might have been well-intentioned on the part of Edward Jenner. But the point is that since then, it's been a malicious scam that, as far as I can tell in studying the history, it's never prevented disease at all. It's changed its form sometimes and made it go underground and resulted in worse health problems. Or like when they did the polio vaccine and finally admitted, well, it doesn't prevent polio, but it is a carrier of certain cancer viruses, which many people think is what's part of the cancer epidemic now, although there are many causes. That's probably just one major one. So the thing about Trump is he's willing to question stuff that you're not allowed to question. That's incredible. So you don't just get somebody like that all the time from either party. Most of the Republicans are totally corrupt. The Republicans in the 2016 election were pushing toward war with Russia. They were ready to shoot down airplanes over Syria, where Russia was invited and the U.S. was not. Most of those Republican candidates would have gotten us into war with Russia. Certainly the Democratic candidate would have. And you may have heard of her, Hillary. You know, she was saying with great emphasis, when the president gives the order for the nuclear weapons to be, the missiles to be fired, it must be followed. She looked like some kind of a monster out of some other dimension, which could be the reality. But, and she was saying she was ready to shoot down Russian aircraft over Syria where Russians were invited, and demonizing Russia. Well, why would she and almost all the Republicans, who are all corrupt, and all the media, why would they demonize Russia? What do you think? You think it's because Russia's a threat? You think it's because Russia hacked the election? No, the people who hacked the election was Homeland Security working with the Democrats trying to get Hillary elected and turn over all the votes for Trump. Trump probably won about 4-1 on the popular vote. And you can tell that by the relating the numbers of people who came to support each candidate at the rallies and events they held. There was no comparison at all. And so they did a lot of switching of votes electronically, and a lot. It's been shown by O'Keefe working for, I'm forgetting the name of his organization. It's been on Alex's show. But they had people walk into the Democratic headquarters and the different organizations that were working together, laughing and saying, yeah, we had all these voters who were illegal voters going around from one place to another, voting in one place, voting in another place, voting in another place to try to get Trump overturned. And they just didn't quite do it enough. So he got in, and they're totally upset and panicked about that now. That's what's behind the Antifa thing and all that. So now what they're attempting to do, getting ready for the 2018 election, since it's already 2018, right? A few minutes ago it was 2016. Now it's 2018. Time is really going fast, I think. And the whole idea now is that besides the constant smearing of Trump, this is not because Trump's like the best person in the world or something. It's not at all like that. We're after principles and the well-being of humanity and the biosphere. Trump could be taught about the real environmental issues, not the fake garbage that tries to get people terrified of global warming or climate change, and then make sure to make it happen with the geoengineering disrupting all the natural climate systems, so people see that it's true, and they'll be more panicked about it, and they'll say, well, we got to give up our rights right away because it's global warming, and just in case global warming's not happening, it's at least climate change, so you can't use your refrigerator anymore. And Obama would go to Africa and say to the people who lived in Africa, well, you can't all have cars and air conditioning because the planet would boil over. This is really, condescending and false information. The real energy technology, as Dr. Stephen Greer has gone into in great detail, has been available for at least 100 years, and it's not solar and wind. Those are nice, but the real energy technologies that have been discovered that people have died for even talking about are things like magnetic, based on permanent magnets, and things that are more advanced than that. And they don't take any input at all. It's been demonstrated that cars could be run on water. They're not trying to figure that out. They already know how to do it. The man who did it and drove his car all around the country, Stanley Myers, the best known one, I think he drove a dune buggy around demonstrating. See, I care about this stuff because I'm a really devoted environmentalist. That doesn't make me an idiot. I can see who Trump is, and I don't care what party he's in. He's this incredible person who actually wants to help the country. That's, overwhelmingly huge opportunity for us to support him. Not because he's right on everything, but to get the information that he needs to fill in his gaps of ignorance, because based on his personality and motive, he will act on it. If he learns about geoengineering, for example, I don't know what he would do. He might send the Air Force to stop it. I mean, that's the kind of thing that a real president would do. Not tell all kinds of nonsense while he works for the criminals. If Trump was as bad as they said, they would love him, because they're all totally corrupt and evil and not telling the truth. If he were like that, if he was really a fascist, no problem. They would like him a lot, because what they're working toward is tyranny, which can be called fascism or communism. They're just different styles of tyranny. There's no utopia. You would have seen it by now. The people in China don't have utopia yet. And they've been under a system that started with Mao, thanks to the U.S. putting him in there. Because the corrupt people in the U.S. are the same as the corrupt people in China. Communism doesn't get to the utopia part. It gets to the organ harvesting part. And you might want to take a look at that. We've got an undercover person working for exposing organ harvesting. That's like involuntary organ donation, right? That's where you give your liver or something while you're still alive, and it's not up to you whether you do it. That's what's going on over there. It's really happening. And people who visit there and are allowed to see certain areas, and like little token yoga practitioners in the park and stuff like that, that's so that they won't realize what's actually going on. What's actually going on is absolutely horrendous. And it's intended to come here. And there are people calling themselves freedom people or patriot people. It doesn't matter what they're called, but they don't want tyranny. They want freedom. They want the original idea of America. And those were the people holding the prayer vigil today in Portland, to the great distress of Antifa and the corrupt elements of the city government who were saying Nazis were coming. That's what was going on. I was afraid I wouldn't have enough to talk to you about, but that's one element out of about 20 that I wanted to mention and give you some perspective on. And we're more than halfway done with our short time here. Anyway, understand, don't fall for the partisan nonsense. Don't vote all Republican or vote all Democrat. You miss the whole point if you do that. Look at the individuals. Now, in this case, both parties are corrupt and criminal organizations, as far as I can tell, in America and much of the world. But the Democratic Party has been selected as the chosen party to really bring in what they claim to be against. World War, as Hillary was pushing, and the Republicans were too, but just not as well coordinated as Hillary was doing. And they still intend to do that and to destroy the economy in America, which Trump, has done fantastic things to bring back so far. But he's working against this enemy that's not visible to most of the people, and that's the central bank. And the central bank is allied with the Democratic Party, the communists, the Antifa, the people who want to destroy the country. They were well on the way to doing that before Trump got here. Even with the little bit that Trump's been able to do under attack, the economy is showing great signs of strength, but it can't last until the threat and the damage from the Federal Reserve that's happening every day gets stopped. And so Trump is beginning, I think, to understand some of that, but if he understood as much as Kennedy understood, who I think got pretty much the whole picture of what the Federal Reserve was. Kennedy issued an order. It's still on the books as far as I know. It's got a lot of ones and zeros in the number. You can look it up really easy. It's an executive order that he issued shortly before he died. And the order was to, he was going to shut down the Federal Reserve, and he already started issuing money that did not go through the Federal Reserve. It was called U.S. notes, and I believe it was silver-backed, which is the only thing that makes the money actually worth anything, is to have silver or gold behind it. These people that talk about, oh, we're going to back it with all the natural resources and with oil, and that's just nonsense. Because what does backing mean? It means you can go into the bank, and I'm sorry to jump around. I just want to tell you all this stuff, but we'll do some more next week. But it means you can walk into the bank and you give them your dollar bill, and it says redeemable in, and they give you what it's redeemable in. So you go into the bank teller is not going to give you a milligram or a milliliter of oil. That's not going to work for reasons that you can probably understand. But they could give you gold or silver, and that was happening until those things were cut off. If you have gold or silver backing at a certain rate for your currency, that's the end of inflation. That's a big deal, because inflation is what's been called a hidden tax. Ron Paul has talked about it a lot. G. Edward Griffin has written one of the best books that I think exists on it. And what they do is they issue all this money out of nothing. It's called liquidity, I think they call it, to sound really impressive. And when they issue more and more and more of that, and there's nothing behind it, you turn in $1, you get another dollar bill. There's no value. And as they put more and more of it into circulation, either in paper or on the computer as little credits, like when they give you a loan and there's no money in the bank to give you the loan, but they just punch into the computer that you have a loan now. And of course, you have to pay them interest. You may have to pay them 3 or 4 times the value of your house. And you don't realize that's just, you're being robbed. But it's in the system, so it's looking really official. And as long as that's in place, Trump or anybody else can't get a permanent long-term economic solution. And what they're planning right now is that to let it get us up to a certain height, and Trump's been celebrating this amazing rise in the American stock markets because, yeah, jobs are coming back, and a lot of employers are coming back from overseas because Trump's cut their taxes. And the crazy people in the opposition say, well, he's helping the rich or these big companies. He shouldn't do that. Well, right, if he doesn't do that, there won't be any companies. Nobody has any jobs, right? So they're really crazy, but they're intentionally crazy. That line of reasoning is completely off track, usually intentionally when they understand. So, what the Federal Reserve and its allies are planning, in my opinion, is to let the stock market go up to a certain point. Trump is going to celebrate. His followers will say, see, that proves that he's doing a great job. Then they're going to crash the economy, which is totally in the hands of the Federal Reserve. They can do it overnight. They did it in 1929. They can do it now. That's a big threat to the country, and I don't think Trump understands it fully, because John Kennedy did, and he said they have to be shut down. Ron Paul understood it completely and still does. I think Rand Paul probably understands it completely too. And a really good thing is that Rand Paul has become more friends with Trump and is sharing information with him. In fact, I said that the hatred against President Trump, which started when he was just running, because they knew what his personality was and what his motive was, that's why they hate him, not because of anything that he's saying. I mean, other than that it reflects his character. I said that they're really mad at Trump and really want him dead, impeached, or both, whatever comes first. That's why they're trying to steal the 2018 election by corrupting social media and all the censorship that's in it, which is already well underway. Google is a totally censored search engine now, and so are the major social media platforms. That's why Real Video and other ones you need to support, and we have a presence there already. So they put unbelievable pressure on Trump, who had run on a peace platform, the only one in either party. And they said, Russia is pure evil. Putin is pure evil personified. If you go to see him and negotiate with him at all, you're even more of a Russian agent than you already are for for the Russians being the reason that Trump was elected, which is completely nonsense. Trump was elected because not all of the vote fraud and the electronic hacking by the corrupt elements of governments and the Democratic Party and things like that, they didn't work. And the people wanted freedom, and they didn't want to be fined for not paying the insurance company for health care they didn't want, which was the wonderful, thing that Obamacare really was. It was to cheat people and support the insurance companies. That's what it was for. That's why all the premiums in the insurance payments went up sometimes three times or more under Obamacare. That was all free and wonderful and less than the cost of a cable bill, according to Obama, right? They wanted to change from that kind of destructive nonsense that was killing the economy and destroying the borders, which are necessary to even have a country. That the previous president was giving people free bus passes as illegal aliens to just come in and get on welfare. And if you do that, you no longer have a country. It's not that you're compassionate. It's that you're suicidal. There's a difference. Illegal aliens are not immigrants. There's no connection. Immigrants are fantastic, and they go through the correct process no matter what country they want to immigrate into. They don't just sneak in. And then they love that country and they support it. That's what an immigrant is. Illegal aliens are a whole different thing, and they're being used as a weapon against America and most of the Western countries now. And that's not compassionate. That's just really dumb. It's not dumb at the people who are organizing it. It's intentional. And they're finding revolutionaries in parts of Africa that has been destroyed by previous policies of the U.S. and some current leftover policies. And they're coming in to destroy the Western countries, and the UN is behind a lot of it. And the UN is not a nice group. And that's going to take longer to talk about sometime in the future, but we may get to it. So anyway, that's kind of just painting a few little pieces of the picture of what's going on with the vicious hatred against Trump and anybody who supports him. In fact, the mainstream media has had major commentators on saying that anybody who voted for Trump or supports him now is a fascist, right? So obviously I'm a fascist because I want the environment taken care of, and I want everybody to be healthy and prosperous and free and mutually respectful. So I must be a fascist according to mainstream media. Words are being used as a major weapon against you, and that's why Trump said correctly that the corrupt fake media is an enemy of the American people, and it absolutely is. And by extension, it's a weapon against the people of the entire world. Because if they succeed in making America a complete weapon in favor of tyranny, people in every country are going to be hurt by it. Already have been. Trump's trying to turn that around. We need to get the rest of his information to him and make sure he doesn't get victimized by these people who want him killed and impeached and all that kind of stuff. I could go on that subject because it's really important. And this is not something to fight about between parties, between left and right. This is something to become conscious of yourself as a human being. And Trump's not the only one. There are other great people who could become presidents in every country, and not just presidents, but city council members and school board members. And I mean, they're needed everywhere. It's not about Trump. It's about all the people that could fill those roles, so that the power positions that are largely filled by really malicious individuals now could be replaced, and actual good people get in those offices and positions and help turn things around. And there's a lot more that people can do besides just vote, besides debate and argue and protest and all. There's amazing things that you can do. That's what we get in. I can't talk freely about those things now, but I can in the club that starts in 45 minutes. We're meeting, and that's once a week. You're invited if you are interested in that. LostArtsRadio.com/club if you want to get entry into that. But I want to go to another issue or two before our last few minutes are gone. There's a great newsletter called Vaxxter, spelled V like Victor, AXXTER. It's from Sherry Tenpenny, who was a guest recently on live stream with us. And she was saying that a Boston laboratory has admitted that they're growing Ebola virus for our protection, of course, for you, because they like you so much. They don't want you to, get infected with Ebola, and then die because they didn't do their research. So they're experimenting with weaponized, altered forms of Ebola. And Dr. Tenpenny explains that the natural Ebola doesn't really do much of anything. It's a very benign virus, according to her. And she has a lot of expertise in these things. But when you weaponize it, and they know how to do that now, then it's like the version that they released in Africa from a lab, I think was in Sierra Leone, Western Africa. And that was right after a possibly mistakenly declassified experiment which was released, which was done by a military agency in the U.S., showing that they had an antidote for it that worked 100%, deactivated the virus right on the spot. It's known as nanosilver. You might have heard of colloidal silver. Nanosilver is just smaller particles. And there's all different concentrations of it that you can find in a good natural food store. Even some bad natural food stores that happen to have that good product in it. And the concentrations go up to at least 500 parts per million. The color varies a little bit with that too, but the one that they were saying was perfect against Ebola was 10 parts per million, very low concentration. So not even that much silver, but it was enough to totally stop the Ebola. Well, I know a doctor, a friend of ours, that tried to get it over to West Africa. I know actually 2 doctors that were doing that. And the first one that I mentioned, they ordered, this is the collusion between all the global industries that are in on the goal of tyranny and extermination. And they called up the airline and said, you do not deliver this silver to West Africa no matter what. And you put it in a warehouse and divert it. And the airline did it right away. And then they went to this doctor and ordered the bank that she dealt with, and I think it was Chase at the time, to freeze the money in her business account, which they did right away. No problem. It's not a legal proceeding. It's whatever the government agency tells the bank to do, the bank just does right away. I've seen this many times. So they stopped her access to her own money. They called up PayPal, apparently, and had PayPal stop transacting any of her business just in case she was going to sell any of this silver. And that's what's really going on. And then the World Health Organization called up the government in West Africa and said, and they had just told them, look, find a cure however you can. Any drug that might work, try it on everybody. Whatever you have to do, this is an emergency. But when they found out they were going to try the silver, they called them up and said, if you give anybody access to the silver or you experiment with it in any way, you're going to have really serious problems for your whole country. Do not even think about doing that. And they stopped the experiments. And fortunately, the real experiment they were doing to see what weaponized Ebola would do to the people and if it would spread and maybe, infect America too, they brought some people over with it to try that. It failed. It wasn't weaponized enough, apparently. So now this lab working on it in Boston is an area of concern. You might want to check out the Baxter newsletter and see if you can get on that. But anything that's really threatening the agenda, which is tyranny as step one, but then which we're moving toward, but total censorship of anything that tells you guys anything you need to know that is against the globalist agenda. That's called shadow banning and sometimes total censorship. A lot of great people have been taken off primary social media platforms. It's leading up to their plan to steal the 2018 election so that if you put in Trump, all you get back on a Google search is that he's a racist Nazi. That's how Google can steal elections. The same with the social media network. So the circle around Trump that is intended to prevent this information from getting to him was breached last week. So I get to tell you some more good news. That was really good news. So some of this information is getting to him now. And if he has time for it, it's going to be great. So as I was mentioning about his Russia trip, and I'm watching the clock here because we're almost out of time, the fact that he finally got over his intimidation from the false advisors and everybody around him in the media, and he went to visit Putin, who was a person he should have seen right away, because Putin's been doing some really good things that you never hear about on mainstream media. He's been banning GMOs, at least for a 10-year period, till they prove they're safe. And of course, they can never do that because they're a weapon directed against anybody who uses them. They're not safe. So it may be a permanent ban if he can hold on to that. He's been trying to get the Wi-Fi out of schools, which is critically important. There should never be Wi-Fi radiation generated in schools, churches, or anywhere really. and if it is, if you have a cell tower somewhere, it should be far away from human habitation. And most of the connections should be solid cable connections for computers and tablets and stuff, not Wi-Fi at all. And there are ways to minimize the cell phone radiation too. But if you have a cell phone, learn what it is. I mean, it's great convenience. I use one whenever I have to. But don't put it on your head. Don't put it on your body. The agencies that say it's safe are lying. It's not safe. They know it, except for the lower level employees who are so well educated they just think what they memorized is true. That's not education, and that's not science. And there are lots and lots of studies and papers which you're not supposed to know about that say that the energy from the RF radiation from a cell phone interferes with the natural electrical communication in your cells, and it causes all kinds of damage. Even the totally corrupt World Health Organization has been forced to admit that, well, yeah, it probably causes cancer. Sorry, but just probably. We don't know for sure, so just keep using it. You got to go to solid connections. And what's really interesting that our guest Paul G. a few months ago said on our Sunday night show is that the fiber optic cables, at least in America, that could get the Wi-Fi signal or the internet signal to just about everybody's house in every town in America, they're already installed. You're just not supposed to realize that. And that the 5G system, which is all these thousands and thousands of small transmitters, which are really deadly to human health and actually to even animals and plants and insects, you'd have to be some kind of a satanic force to want to roll out something like the 5G system. Well, guess what? How the internet signal gets brought to them? Fiber optic, at least in most cases. It's already there. So a little bit longer, branch could go to each house and each office, and everybody could be told the truth, which is using Wi-Fi is really dumb. It's not good for people or any other living creatures at all, even non-animal creatures. So you're not supposed to know about that. And that's the kind of thing that Trump needs to know, because he's supporting some of the corporations that he thinks must be good because they have jobs and prosperity and everything. And he talks about the Internet of Things being a huge area of jobs in the future. The Internet of Things is to implement Agenda 21. It's for total surveillance and control of everybody and every item on the planet. Rosa Corey talked about it years ago, and you ought to go, if you have time sometime, watch her great YouTube video called Behind the Green Mask. It's a real good way to start understanding Agenda 21, which is a real UN program. And for a long time, the media said, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. All these crazy people, running around, they probably even believe in chemtrails and who knows what else, or that you should only eat organic food and GMOs aren't to feed the world and all these other crazy things they believe in. Rosa Koire explained what Agenda 21 is. It's an actual book that came out of the meeting in the early 90s that they had in South America that started Agenda 21, which is now active all over the world, certainly in the U.S. And the idea is surveillance, control, and then moving everybody into tightly packed cities that they call human settlements to sound really environmental and like they're saving the earth and all this nonsense. Remember, I'm an environmentalist. I get to say how stupid this all is. This is not environmental concern. This is genocide by stages. So this is the kind of thing that's going on. Anyway, what I wanted to say, and we have like 4 minutes left, Rand Paul, one of the only pretty much sane senators, or Congress people at all, decided to go to Russia, which is a great idea. Because, Putin's been doing all these wonderful things. He's been asking to be an ally of the U.S. He's been showing like saintly restraint against American allies that have been trying to goad him into World War III, and he doesn't respond with force. It's amazing. I mean, I keep talking about this helicopter that was shot down by the American ally Turkey, or the terrorists running out of Turkey, and then Russia doesn't bomb Turkey. They come in to see if there's any of their people still alive on the helicopter. So they bring another helicopter in, and they lower a rescue team on a rope, and they're murdered by the same people as they come down the rope. That's against every kind of international principle ever, and Russia doesn't retaliate. So what does the U.S. do? The Congress puts sanctions on Russia, which the Democrats really push for, and most of the Republicans think it's great. So Rand Paul, who they'll all call a Russian agent, is going to Russia Monday to visit with the deputy foreign minister over there, which is a wonderful example to what the whole spirit should be. Cooperation between the two powers that have like 90% of all the nuclear weapons on the planet. And Putin is the reason that there's an opportunity to become allies. They're not communist anymore. They're more freedom-oriented than the U.S. in many ways. And I don't mean freedom to sell GMOs. That's not freedom. That's suicide. And Russia knows the importance of their borders and to take care of their kids, to support normal families, to promote organic farming. Putin has said he wants to be the biggest exporter of organic food on the planet. That's something really wonderful that could be worked with by the U.S. So Congress is doing this insane thing in the U.S. of wanting to put crushing sanctions on Russia. Well, gee, why would you do that unless you wanted to start World War III? Oh, that's what they do want. And Trump's trying to avoid it. And people are saying he's a Russian agent and a Nazi. Any good organization gets infiltrated, and that includes good countries based on at least the idea of freedom. So you can assume that that would happen in your country, wherever you are in the world, if there's talk about freedom for individuals, protecting the good parts of the country, and letting everybody live in prosperity and cooperation. That will be infiltrated and attacked. That's what's happening in the U.S., and it's a real target right now. Now, I'm out of time, but I want to tell you that we have an upcoming show. We've been doing live streams, and this is the one that you'll see a replay of on Sunday is really important. But the one coming up this next Tuesday is totally incredible. It's about state-sanctioned government kidnapping of children in the U.S. that's going on every day. And we're going to bring a real victim on the show, on the live stream. You're going to see her. And her baby's still separated from her, stolen by the government, a government agency. And we're going to get into it. I think it's stuff that you want to know about. This terrorist organization is operating in your town. It's operating in the UK. It's operating in many other countries. And you need to be aware of it. Not to feel terrible and get all despairing or everything, but to know what we're facing and what we need solutions for. This is one of them. So that's watch lostartsradio.com. for a live stream on the website and also on the major social media platforms. And then it will be put also on Reel.video, where it will never get censored, at least not in the foreseeable future. So I guess the bottom line is don't fall for this push for division, hate, finding out who to hate and being against them and, trying to destroy all the people you think are bad. Everybody is human beings. They all, even racially, they all came from the same place in Southern Africa before they migrated around the world. It's a family. You're not supposed to be fighting each other. You're supposed to become an example of what you'd like to see in the world. And then that affects other people much more than attacking them and debating them, calling them idiots and stuff. Be the symbol of unity. That's what Trump needs to do, but there's a lot he doesn't know, and you could do a better job, I'm sure, and then be an example for him and everybody else. It's not in his hands, it's in yours. So anyway, we'll see you tomorrow night, hopefully on the Sunday show. Those who are in Planetary Healing Club meeting is in 28 minutes. Anybody who's not in that, if you're interested, go to lostartsradio.com/club, and we'd be happy to see if you want to start taking this to the next level. Otherwise, we'll see you again next week, and we'll look at some things going on in the world. I hope you have a really great week, and maybe we'll see you tomorrow night for the show with the man from Vietnam about organ harvesting. That's going to be really interesting. Very good man, dedicating his life to a good cause and helping the people escape from certain things that are going on. So thanks for spending the time. I really appreciate it. I know your time's valuable. And it's an honor to be able to talk with you. See you again next week.